All right, well, let's get started. Yeah, I have things recording. So welcome everybody to the Rochester section of the OSA, our Tuesday night tech talks. This is actually our first talk of the season. So of course it's virtual tonight. And tonight we have Dr. Susana Marcos, and I have a short bio here for Susana. So on July 1st, 2021, Susana became the David R. Williams Director of the Center for Visual Science at the University of Rochester. So very recently, with affiliations being a professor at the Institute of Optics and the Pflaum Eye Institute. And prior to her current position, Susana had been the director of the Institute of Optics at CSIC, which I believe is the National Research Council for Spain, and the director at large of the Optical Society of America, and a professor of research and director of the Laboratory of Visual and Biophotonics Optics at the Institute of Optics, CSIC, where she supervised a multidisciplinary team, an international team of over 25 members. She's a pioneer in the development of new techniques for the evaluation of the eye, including retinal imaging instruments, aberrometers, adaptive optics, anterior segment imaging of the eye, and intraocular lens design. And several of these technologies have been marketed and have already contributed to improving the diagnosis and treatment of thousands of patients. Susana has also published over 180 highly cited research articles and is the inventor of 20 patent families. And there's many more accomplishments here, but I'm going to leave it at that. So Susana, please continue, and the floor is yours here. Oh, and one thing I'll mention is during the talk, please mute your microphone so we don't get any background noise or dogs barking. But if you'd like to chime in and ask a question, feel free to do that. All right, go ahead, Susana.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for the introduction and for bringing me to this group. I would say the Optica, right now with the new name, Rochester Section. It's a pleasure, particularly as I recently moved to Rochester, so I'm getting to know more and more the community. So I, as has been mentioned, I was a former member. I still have many projects going on there at the Institute of Optics in Spain, and it's been a pleasure to actually move from one Institute of Optics to the Institute of Optics in Rochester. So I will be talking today of research primarily performed in Spain, also with many collaborations worldwide, about understanding, measuring, and improving the eye's optics. And I'm mentioning there a few disclosures on patents that refer to projects and to technologies that I will be presenting today, as well as collaborative agreements that we have with lots of companies in the area of ophthalmic optics. And also the fact that I'm a co-founder of Two Eyes Vision and a partner of Planoptica, and I will be also talking about, how these products actually were transferred from the lab to something that is actually being used out in the field and in the clinic. And this is just a few images of CSIC and now my new home in Rochester. So all I'm going to present are actually optical technologies. So it fits very well into the section. But the particularity of them is that they're all used to either investigate or improve the eye. And I always say that for an optics person, as I guess everyone here, the eye is just a fascinating optical instrument. And I think you can actually craft a book of optics just using the eye as an example. You find all the principles of optics in the eye, from, refraction, diffraction, aberrations, absorption, waveguides. I mean, it's truly fascinating, the optics of the eye as an optical element. And of course, we use optics in all we do. So the imaging technologies, and there's just a few examples here of, I mean, optical benches and optical tables and optical components and optoelectronics that you would find elsewhere. We use them to image the eye or to understand the optical properties of the eye. And the eye is, as it's well known, formed by two lenses, the cornea and the crystalline lens, that project images of the outside world onto the retina, where the images are sampled by the photoreceptors in the retina. And those photoreceptors are interesting because they really act as fiber optics. But today we'll be concentrating on the cornea and crystalline lens and various technologies that we have developed to measure the optical properties of the eye, also to measure and quantify the geometry, the biomechanical properties of the eye, so that we can actually form these custom eye models, really understanding the relationship between the optical quality and the geometrical properties of the lenses. And also because of vision being, I mean, it's a neural process, right? So the images are projected on the retina, but then, the visual system that is part of the brain processes those images. And it's interesting to explore the relationship between the optical image projected on the retina and the perceptual image. Because everything that we can do, if you think about when you're treating an eye, or when you're treating the most prevalent conditions that I will be discussing today, just myopia or cataract, what you're doing is you are altering the geometry of the cornea, or you're replacing the crystalline lens by an intraocular lens. So you're actually changing the geometry of these lenses. But what you want to do at the end of the day is to improve vision, right? So the connection between the optics, the retinal image that is projected on the retina, and the perceptual image is critical. And again, we use optics to investigate the impact of these aberrations on vision. So the eye suffers from aberrations, and I mean, there's an interesting quote by Helmholtz that says that if an optician was going to sell a human eye with, a lens with so many imperfections as the eye has, he would be very prompt at returning it. So the eye is actually is very robust. It's not an optimal optical system, and it has aberrations. So that, and this is something that we use as a technology to measure the aberrations of the eye. Rays of light that go through different parts of the pupil, they don't converge on the same location of the retina, and therefore the point spread function is not diffraction limited, and that has the impact of reducing contrast in the images that are perceived. And over the years, we have been using technologies that are common in astronomy, like wavefront sensing, to measure the aberrations of the eye. So in aberrometry for the eye, you have a Harman-Schach wavefront sensor, very much like the ground-based telescopes have to measure the dynamics of the turbulences in the atmosphere. We have this technology, these wave aberrations, to measure the aberrations of the eye. And we've had transferred this into the lab, and we have measured the aberrations under various conditions. So in normal eyes, the aberrations change. It's kind of a fingerprint. They do vary in magnitude and vary in orientation across the population. They change with accommodation as the crystalline lens focuses near and far. They also change with aging. So in the clinic, this is one technology that has actually made its way to the clinic, and today it's being used, being coupled with refractive surgery lasers, like flying spot lasers, to actually improve the ablation and to reduce the aberrations of the eye. So ideally, you can reshape the cornea in such a way that the aberrations, or at least fixed aberrations, can be removed, and that has been thanks to, you know, this transfer of a technology that was initially driven by astronomy to refractive surgery lasers. So among all the refractive errors in the eye, all these aberrations, and we normally measure up to about 35 aberrations, including coma or spherical aberration. Well, the most well-known and the highest are refractive errors. So in an eye that is emmetrope, the rays will focus on the retina with the aberrations we've seen, but the image is in best focus at the retinal plane. However, in refractive errors like hyperopia or myopia, the eye is either too short or too long, and myopia correction is needed. And of course, this is something that has been done over the centuries. But myopia is becoming the new pandemic. So in Western populations, myopia affects about 30% of the population, and this is a number that is increasing per decade. But there's some Asian populations where myopia prevalence is actually over 90%. And the interesting thing about myopia is that it's actually not well known why myopia develops. I mean, what triggers that the eye starts elongating too much? Yet there's a number of corrections. I mean, obviously you can correct with glasses, you can correct with refractive surgery. That doesn't help the eye being too long. So there's a number of pathologies that are related to the eye being too long. So the prevalence of conditions like glaucoma are higher in myopes or retinal detachment. So if we knew more about the etiology of myopia and how and why myopia develops, we would be able to find ways to perhaps control the eye growth and try to halt the myopia progression. And there's some optical treatments that are attempting to do that. In any case, in the world, there is over 150 million people that suffer from severe vision loss due to uncorrected refractive errors. And this has actually been recognized as a problem from the World Health Organization, that has asked to find for ways to produce rapid and efficient and accurate refraction, really measuring the prescription of the eye. That normally requires from skilled optometrists. So in Western countries like the US or Europe, there is one optometrist every 6,000 people. So you go to rural India and there is one optometrist per 250,000, or some places in Africa, there is one per million. So when the eye care bus gets into a rural and remote village in these areas of the world, you find these incredibly long lines. And by the time an optometrist actually can take a prescription, there's literally no way to prescribe the lenses that these people may need. Yet eyeglasses are one of the most cost-effective healthcare technologies, right? So you can find glasses just for under $5, and the bottleneck that has been recognized is really to achieve an accurate refraction. So that was the purpose of a project that we did in collaboration with MIT, and that was a program called Madrid MIT Envision that would foster technologies from the lab into the clinic or into the outside world, optical-based or imaging-based technologies. So we partnered with a group of very talented fellows from this program that were able to convert our Harmon Shack aberrometry sitting on an optical table into something very small and portable. So that was one of the first prototypes using kind of off-the-shelf mounts and so on. But then this is how it looks now. Now it's completely self-functioning with at the click of a button, and based on Harmon-Shack, providing a very accurate reading of refractive errors. So this is the technology. It's called QuickSee. It has been recognized with many awards, and there is a spin-off company, Optica, that commercializes this device. It's actually manufactured in India, but now it's actually being used in over 30 countries. Millions of people are benefiting from having the prescription out of this instrument. So it's literally a Harmon-Shack wavefront sensor. Because we measure the aberrations of the eye, we can be more accurate in finding the defocus that optimizes the retinal image quality that you measure with aberrometry. And then it's a see-through instrument so that the patient actually can look far. So it's the readings are not subject to instrumental myopia. So it's actually very accurate both in defocus and astigmatism. And we believe that this is is being a useful technique in areas like this where accessing a prescription or an optometrist is not that easy. There is also a version of the instrument that, not trying to replace an optometrist here in the US or Europe, but that can help in screening and really speeding up the optometry practice, also in developed countries. Okay, so the cornea and the crystalline lens are responsible for these refractive errors and for the high order aberrations that I mentioned before. But sure enough, it's interesting to actually understand what are the sources of these aberrations. And the sources must be the shape of these lenses, as well as the internal structure. So over the years, we have developed a three-dimensional quantitative optical coherence tomography. So OCT is an interferometric technique. We're now using sweat source OCT to generate these very rapidly. So these systems operate at currently 200,000 interferograms, like A scans per second, so that we can construct these three-dimensional images very quickly not subject to eye movements. And we have been quantifying these shapes and this geometry that we obtain, correcting for some distortions that occur in OCT that are due to the scanning architecture of the system, and they're due to refraction, because literally you're looking at the surfaces, and this is the cornea, this is the iris, this is the lens, this is an intraocular lens. So it's a merged image of an eye before surgery, before cataract surgery, and then with an intraocular lens implanted. So there is refraction in these different media, and we're using like ray tracing to correct for those distortions, so that every measurement of, let's say, corneal thickness, the shape of the cornea, the topography of the cornea, thickness of the lens, or the shape of the lens are all accurate. And so we have been using this technology to measure the cornea, but because they're so quickly in capturing these B scans of the cornea, we can process other dynamic aspects, particularly of the cornea, to assess not only the optical properties of the cornea, but also the biomechanical properties. So what you see here is that we're using OCT in combination with an ERPUF to look at the deformation of the cornea. And then we are using finite element models to reconstruct the mechanical properties of the cornea. So we have been looking at the temporal deformation and the spatial deformation, and through inverse modeling, reconstructing not only the shape of the cornea, but also the Young's modulus of the cornea, or viscoelastic constants of the cornea. And this is particularly relevant because there are some diseases like keratoconus where the mechanical integrity is compromised and the cornea deforms. So the mechanical properties are reduced. And there is a treatment like cross-linking that uses a photosensitizer and light. So the photosensitizer can be riboflavin and the irradiating light can be UV light, or more recently we're using rose bengal, which is a pink photosensitizer, and green light for photoactivation. That results in a cross-linking of the collagen fibers. So very much like what you have in polymer technologies, where you use a cross-linker to modulate the mechanical strength of the polymer. We're using that for the cornea, and we're seeing that the cornea becomes stiffer, and this is something that we now can quantify through the use of OCT in combination with a nerve path. So we can look at biomarkers. For example, we're seeing that in these keratoconic corneas where there is an area of the cornea that is weakened, we find like an asymmetry in the deformation in different meridians. And with this sweat source OCT, where we can capture now different meridians, we're looking at these asymmetries in the deformation. So as part of an European project, we have built these systems. So one is AirPack based, but there are others that the stimulus to the cornea are a sound wave or ultrasound. But we are reducing those into a like a portable device. So very much like the QuickSee technology to actually be able to use it in screening. And this is part of a consortium with us and several academic institutions in Europe, the University of Liverpool and National University of Galway, the National Academy of Sciences in Poland, and then 2 hospitals in Spain and in London, and a number of companies that are helping us to produce the system, again going from bent to bedside. Another technology that we have been developing that helps us to not only measure the optical properties of the eye, but also to understand the impact of the optical aberrations on vision is adaptive optics. And this is a view of one of our adaptive optics visual simulators where we measure the aberrations with a Harman-Schach system, but we also have various devices to actually modulate or change or induce or correct aberrations. That includes a deformable mirror, which is basically a membrane with actuators, electromagnetic actuators. There are 52 actuators controlling the shape of the membrane. We also work with the spatial light modulators that allow us to change the phase locally, and we normally use that to recreate different corrections. We also have a testing channel where we can introduce faceplates, or we can introduce a cuvette with an intraocular lens, for example, that is projected onto the eye. We also have a retinal camera, and we have a psychophysical channel where we basically have a display that the observer that would sit here sees through the various components that modify the aberrations of the eye. So in a sense, you can see that as a way to manipulate the optics, something that you would do, for example, with contact lenses or refractive surgery with one of the refractive surgery lasers that we talked about before, or implanting an intraocular lens in the eye. But you are recreating what you would do in one of those surgeries or one of those corrections without touching the eye. And that's very powerful. And we, in fact, have had and have many collaborations ongoing with basically the major players in the field of ophthalmic optics, because it's very powerful to have a system that without relying on going to the operating room and clinical trials can assess how vision is going to be with the new lens, designs, and you can have the same patient, with the same eye and various optical designs testing the quality of vision through them, as opposed to just having one implanted and relying on statistical comparisons between groups to assess the quality of those lenses. So what we can do with this adaptive optic system, we can correct the aberrations of the eye. So this is the wavefront of an eye, and then when we apply the correction, which operates in closed loop, measuring the aberrations with Harmon-Shack and correcting them with the formable mirror, basically we flatten the wavefront, and so the patient can experience a whole new world, removing the aberrations of the eye. And these are very fun experiments to do, where you perceive the world now without aberrations. And it's interesting that you can adapt to like a sharp world, same way as you can adapt to a bird world. And so this technology has allowed us to really perform psychophysical experiments of neural adaptation to a new visual experience. Of course, that's fun, but what is very interesting is to produce simulations of optical changes that are either produced by treatment, when you're giving like a new pair of glasses, what happens when you're correcting astigmatism, for example, or to new corrections such as diffractive optics or intraocular lenses, or laser refractive surgery, or this disease keratoconus I mentioned before, that progresses into, the cornea progresses into the form of cones. So this is something that you can actually test how people see with, those distorted corneas, and how you may adapt to those, and how you may correct those, and how vision will be changing. So this is something that you can do with adaptive optics, this manipulation, non-invasive manipulation of the eye's optics. And we're using these technologies, both, the assessment of the optical properties of the eye and the optical aberrations and the geometry of the cornea and the crystalline lens, particularly the lens in this particular disease, as well as manipulating the optics to produce different corrections in a very prevalent condition, which is presbyopia. So presbyopia is the loss of the crystalline lens, the loss of capacity of the crystalline lens to accommodate, to reshape to objects near and far. And that affects everyone. It affects 100% of the population over the age of 45, and that's 1 billion people worldwide. So in terms of market, it's a huge market, and in ophthalmology, it's kind of a holy grail, right? To produce a satisfactory correction for presbyopia. So as the crystalline lens ages, there is another condition that kicks in. It's cataract. So with aging, the crystalline lens loses its transparency. This is a condition that affects 50% of the population over 65 years. And it's cataract surgery is actually the most performed surgery in any hospital in the world. There's 28 million of cataract surgeries worldwide. So this is how the crystalline lens looks like. And these are images. This is a movie from using our OCT technology, where you can see how the lens reshapes to accommodate. So this is something that is lost with age. So even if the ciliary muscle keeps working, the crystalline lens becomes rigid, and the force applied doesn't produce a change in its shape. And it also develops opacities with time in aging. So we have used our fully quantitative 3D biometry from OCT to assess the crystalline lens in various conditions. For example, we have been targeting accommodation. So we see how the lens accommodates. So in our technology, we have been able to extrapolate even what happens beyond the iris. So it's actually very cool to see the crystalline lens as we have an accommodated stimulus and the lens responds. Of course, this is a group of 20 young eyes that we measured using this technology, and we have been quantifying things like equatorial plane position, so how the lens diameter decreases with accommodation and changes in the lens surface area. With accommodation, the crystalline lens surface area decreases, and then the lens volume that stays the same with accommodation. So here you can very quickly see that when the eye accommodates, the lens adopts its more round form. So the ciliary muscle actually exerts a force inwards and releases tension in the capsule, in the sonulae that surround the equatorial region of the lens, and therefore when we disaccommodate, the lens is fully stretched, and that's why the diameter increases when we're looking at infinity, and also the lens surface area is highest when the lens is stretched. So, you know, we have a better understanding of how the crystalline lens works when the lens is flexible, and we also have been looking at how this changes with age. So there's big changes that we are assessing with OCT again with age. With age, the crystalline lens becomes thicker. It's actually an organ that keeps growing and growing, and you know, there is now epithelial cells or anything that get removed. And so you see those changes, rapid changes in the very young age, and then something happening here at around the presbyopic age. It's also interesting to see that the crystalline lens seems to have an implication in myopia development. So these are cross-sectional data, so it's not a longitudinal series of eyes that were tracked over time. But what we observed is that the lens thickness increases with axial length, and I mean, the more myopic eyes have a longer eye. So it looks like as the eye elongates, when myopia develops, the crystalline lens becomes thinner. Also, it becomes more stretched, so it has like a larger equatorial diameter. And there is also changes that occur in the curvatures of the crystalline lens. So the lens becomes flatter with the increasing refractive error. So also very interesting insights on what's going on with the lens as myopia develops and the implication. I showed this image before. Of course, one area where these quantitative technologies is of interest is in cataract surgery. So cataract surgery is, when you think about what is measured to select the intraocular lens that is going to be implanted, it's actually very crude. I mean, the state of the art only involves measuring the curvature of the cornea and the actual length of the eye, but nothing about the crystalline lens. Yet the intraocular lens is implanted in the capsular bag. So the capsular bag is emptied from the opacified materials, and the artificial intraocular lens is implanted. So knowing more about the crystalline lens, particularly as it's so different across the population, will allow us to select the intraocular lens to be implanted much better. And we have been looking at patients that we measure before surgery and have like this full information, full reconstruction of the crystalline lens before surgery. So this is a lens with a cataract. And then we can measure them also after surgery with the intraocular lens implanted. And we can find relationships between the three-dimensional parameters of the crystalline lens before surgery, and then the lens position. And the lens position is quite critical, because if the lens gets deviated from where you think it's going to fall, then your correction with the intraocular lens is not going to be perfect. Intraocular lenses have evolved over time, and cataract surgery has evolved, so that, I mean, in the past, it was a surgery to just remove the opacity, right, to produce a transparent medium. But then with new lenses and of course new diagnostics and measurements of the actual length of the eye, the cataract surgery has evolved into being a refractive surgery, so that you can, you can leave someone without a need of glasses for far. Also, the lenses have become more sophisticated, correcting higher order aberrations like spherical aberration and mimicking what the crystalline lens is or does in the young age. And as we will mention before later, the lenses, the new family of lenses are arising to compensate for presbyopia and eliminate the need of glasses for both at near and far. So that leads me to the presbyopia correction. So anyone that, is, as I said, over about 45 years of age knows that, well, it gets hard to read when you become old because of this loss of the accommodation capacity. So what's out there to correct for presbyopia? Well, you have near vision glasses. I mean, they can be single lenses that you just put to read, or they can be progressive lenses, which are very challenging optically and still produce lots of distortion. There is monovision that for many patients, for many surgeons and many contact lens practitioners is the #1 type of correction. In this correction, one eye, normally the dominant eye is corrected for far and the non-dominant eye is corrected for near. So it's actually, for many patients, it's a reasonable option, although it compromises stereo vision in many cases. State-of-the-art correction with contact lenses and intraocular lenses and also refractive surgery is simultaneous vision. So in these cases, there are lenses that provide one area for far and other area for near, so that when you get in the retina, it's actually the superposition of an image that is blurred and an image that is sharp. So it is simultaneous vision, but it comes at the price, right? You get a loss in contrast and a loss in quality at all distances, and it's not a dynamic correction. So it's not what you, what the young eye does, right? We believe the future of intraocular lenses for presbyopic corrections are accommodating intraocular lenses. Have been some attempts, not working so far, but the idea is to replace the crystalline lens with something that dynamically can change power. So simultaneous vision simulations are something that we can do. And this is something that we have been doing with adaptive optic systems. So we can recreate in the spatial light modulators, for example, a diffractive lens or a segmented lens where you have areas that are devoted for far vision and areas that are devoted for near vision. But of course, those systems are bulky. They're very nice to do research. They also are very instrumental when trying new lenses, and when a company comes and wants to assess an intraocular lens in the lab. But it's not something that you would bring to the clinic. So over the years, we have been working hard to make those systems much smaller. And we came to to the idea of using temporal multiplexing, using adjustable lenses like optotunable lenses, to actually produce a through focus variation of power that mimics what a simultaneous vision does. And this is what we're doing. So these optotunable lenses, you can drive them very quickly. You can drive them over the temporal flickering in the eye, and we have been recreating bifocal lenses, trifocal lenses, EDOF, like extended depth of vision lenses. So we can really tailor the through focus performance of these lenses, but now in a temporal manner rather than spatial manner. So initially the system was monocular, but the current version that is commercialized already has 2 channels for 2 eyes. The company is actually called Twice Vision. So it's a binocular system, is a wearable head-mounted device, so that the patient can experience the real world through the optotunable lenses, mimicking different intraocular lens designs. It also works for contact lenses. So this is Twice Vision, and the idea is to provide the patients the experience of this real world through multifocal corrections. First, because it's very difficult to explain to a patient how you can see with multifocal correction. Second, because the number of designs is increasing very rapidly. So you may experience the vision with different lenses that are of choice. And it's a way to manage the expectations of the patients, and also makes it easier for the doctor to take a decision on what lens to implant. And it's not a light decision, because this is something that is worn forever. I mean, it can be explanted, but it's another surgery, right? So you better select right. And what the doctors are saying, that this is a way to maybe screen out some unhappy patient, but screening many other patients that happen to like the intraocular lenses, but they were, the doctors were conservative and not prescribing them because they didn't know how those will result in a patient. So, I mean, there's been many clinical studies assessing the vision with this with the instrument before recreating a given lens, and then after surgery with the intraocular lens implanted. So what we see is that the through focus performance of the simulation and the lens is very similar, both in intraocular lenses as well as in contact lenses, where the patient either does the test with a head-mounted display, a head-mounted instrument recreating the lenses, or the contact lens on eye. So over the years, we have established strategic partnerships and also licensed some of our lens designs to some of these companies. So, for example, Physiol is commercializing one of our designs. This is the isofocal lens. So this is a refractive profile, not a diffractive multifocal lens, producing an extended depth of focus, and design is such that it's more pupil independent than other designs, and it also maintains quality of vision pretty constant over the range it works. And this lens is already being implanted in over 40 patients in 40 countries, and there's already thousands of patients with this lens. So it's interesting. We now have the option to make the patient see through this lens or other lenses, and well, our designs that initially were a design on paper, and then like a prototype that we test on bench in collaboration with the company. They're now in many patients around the world. But of course, I said that the really satisfactory vision, we think, will come from a lens that truly reproduces what the real crystalline lens does. And as such, we have developed a new concept for a lens. This is the light lens. That is a lens that has 2 components. So one component is refractive, so it's a lens to compensate for the refractive error. But it also has like a flexible component, and you can see here how it would work in the animation. So this flexible component would work very much like the crystalline lens does. So when the lens is fully stretched, it will be flatter, and when the lens is relaxed to accommodate, it will be steeper. So how we capture the forces from the ciliary muscle? Well, we do that through another concept involving optics and involving light, which is photo bonding. So if you remember, I mentioned the photo cross-linking, where you use the photosensitizer and light to create bonds between, in that case, it was collagen fibers. But we've seen that the similar concepts work to bond a plastic material to the capsular bag. So what you see here is a piece of a capsular bag from a porcine eye, and plastic material. This is a HEMA, which is a polymer that you use, that is conventionally used in lenses. And what we've seen is that following this dyeing with the photosensitizer, in this case rose bengal, and irradiation with green light, we get this bonding. And this is what, and I think this video is not working, but we have brought this concept into a real surgery, and well, that was a porcine eye being operated very much like in a conventional cataract surgery, where the crystalline lens material is extracted and intraocular lens is implanted. But now we are bonding through the use of a probe that irradiates with green light, and previously staining with the photosensitizer. We are bonding the haptics of the lens to the capsular bag. And in that way, we make sure that the forces from the ciliary muscle are captured. So we have tested the lens in parallel. So here the lens is being mounted in a stretcher system. So it's basically a device with eight arms, 8 PSL motors that reproduce the forces from the ciliary muscle in radially. And what you see here is the flexible component of the lens. So I think what I hope it reminds you what we've seen in the crystalline lens of the eye, right? So when the tension is released, the crystalline lens becomes thicker, and the equatorial radius or the equatorial diameter becomes smaller. And then when the lens is looking at infinity, is achieved when the lens is stretched. The lens is thinner, and the equatorial diameter is larger, and more importantly, you see the changes in shape, right? So you see the changes in the radius of curvature that for this particular material is giving us about a 1.2 diopter range of dynamic focus. So, well, I hope I conveyed you some examples of using optics and using photonics. In some cases, they're concepts derived from astronomy. In other cases, we are combining optics with biomaterials with the idea of guiding surgery, improving vision in the presbyopic eye, in the cataract eye, and also bringing technologies that are handheld or head-mounted, easy to use in either underserved areas or in the clinic. So I think we are attempting in some cases bringing better vision through the use of optical technologies, and we're very happy to do that. So I'm leaving it here with the funding that we've received over the years to, and has implications in the world that I presented today. So new project coming also to Rochester through the Empire State Development Funds, collaborative work with Clario Vision, also with the Center for Data Science, and you can visit us there and follow us on Twitter if you want to see what's going on in research and also development, as we keep the hopes that we can bring much of these technologies to industry and to help patients and to help the clinicians to better diagnose and better see. And I think I'll leave it here.
Great. Well, thank you, Susana, for that talk. And now we can open the floor to some questions. If you want to ask a question, just unmute your mic and go ahead. I'll get us started with one. One of the slides that you had there, Susana, you mentioned a European Commission project, and I forget what system it was, but it was one of the metrology systems that you were trying to shrink smaller and smaller. Just out of curiosity, is there any activity using photonic integrated circuits to put like a system on a chip for these types of technologies?
Mhm. They are. We're not using it in our current prototypes, but yeah, there is efforts to bring OCT onto a chip. So there's light sources them to do that. So there's for example, there is a light source which is on chip. It's an akinetic source, so called. And there is also a company, at least one company that I know, called MedLumix, that is bringing like the interferometer parts and some parts of the OCT into a chip. So I think that
Sorry.
I think that's coming, and as some of these technologies attempt to be moved into point of care devices, for example, in OCT, there's the idea that you can have like a retinal OCT that the patient can bring home, for example, to monitor when they need the next injection for the treatment of their diabetic retinopathy, for example, and know when they have to go to the clinic and get the new shot. So things like this are, I think they will only be possible if you integrate in something that is small and portable and kind of point of care type.
All right, yeah, thanks. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, there's David Lee's sent a question in the chat.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I can read it for you. How much of a problem is accuracy of placement by the surgeon for the new IOL you were doing research on?
Mhm. Yeah, so that's a very good question. And well, the tilt and decentration of the lens, it's not, I mean, like with the state of the art cataract surgery, I mean, unless there is the problem, that the sonules get disrupted or something happens. In the normal surgery, the lens tilt and decentration is preserved from that of the crystalline lens. So basically, there is some tilt and decentration that occur because the eye is a very non-center system. In fact, the fovea, the area of finer vision, is not even centered on the optical axis of the eye. So there's some inherent, decentrations and tilts happening in the eye, but it is not extra to the surgery. But you're right, and it's and people have thought about, I mean, should we correct for that tilt and decentration? Should the lenses be centered? Very well centered in the center of the pupil. So what we see is, for example, in aspheric intraocular lenses that are kind of the state of the art monofocal lenses. In fact, the tilt and decentration that are natural to the eye are helping. We found that in 75% of the patients having some tilt and decentration of the lens actually compensated for this tilt of the fovea. So it was actually a good thing to have. For diffractive optics, I mean, if there's large decentrations, they may, or segmented optics where you have some parts of the pupil for far and near, it may cause not working as expected, right? Because you may lose the balance of near and far in terms of energy.
So if anyone has any questions, please just unmute yourself and feel free to ask. Well, I have another question for you, Susana. You mentioned something about being able to simulate what the image of somebody's eye due to some aberrations. And I think you even mentioned after correction, what an image might look like. And this is what piqued my interest. On the next slide, you showed an IOL with some diamond turning lines in it. And I was curious, have you done any simulations for understanding what the image might look like due to like mid and high spatial frequency errors like that?
I mean, to some extent, yes. At least what is the design? I mean, like the theoretical design of the lens. So with the SLM, for example, which has, it's pixel based. So we can reproduce a diffractive optics in our SLM. So yeah, there's some secondary effects that may occur that lead to this photopsia, where, for example, in the echelons of the diffractive optics, you may have like, the light that hits the apex of the echelons that, may contribute to some background. But in general, what we find, and we do that in patients before and after surgery, is that in terms of visual quality, like perception of the images, this is a subjective task where the patients just score, their judgment of the quality of the images, or more functional based tasks where, it's either like a visual acuity test or other tests where, the patient has to do face recognition or things like this. With the simulated lens and the real implanted lens, the match is really good. So we're pretty sure that we are very accurately, reproducing or mimicking the design of those lenses and projecting them into the eye.
I had a question. How is the strength of the muscular, the muscles of the eye for adjusting the focal distance using your adjustable lens? Is that age related, or is it okay for old people to have new lenses?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Yeah, so there is some slight degradation with age, but for the most part, they are fully functional and capable of, if the right material is there to deform the lens. So presbyopia is really a condition that affects the lens. So the lens becomes harder. So even if you have the force that you do, it's impossible to reshape the lens. But once you replace that material, and ideally, you could do like a lens refilling, right, with the proper polymer, although that didn't work for some other reasons. But the muscles are able to reshape. So the muscles are functional. And so is the rest of the accommodative plan. The capsular bag also plays a role, and that's problematic if you have like a material that needs, to be molded by the capsular bag. That's problematic because when you do a cataract surgery, you're removing part of the capsular bag, and there is fibrosis in the capsular bag. So you cannot rely in the mechanical properties and flexibility of the capsular bag. So that's why our lens doesn't rely on the capsular bag to be reshaped. It only uses the periphery of the capsular bag as an interface to the ciliary muscle. But the ciliary muscle is functional.
Thank you much.
Here's one more, and sort of along that line. What is the lifetime you expect of this kind of thing? Is it something you can get it and forget it? You're good, or might you have to do it again?
You mean the accommodative intraocular lens?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we are at the very early stages. But that's an excellent question, right? So there's two things that may fail. One is the material that may opacify with time, or that, as any other material, when it's stretched many times, it kind of fades. So these are certainly things that need to be checked. So what we've seen is that first the bonding that we do ex vivo, for example, it's preserved over time. So we have samples that were bonded years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and they're still in place. And we have done like fatigue essays on the material. And the intraocular lens manufacturers have various ways to kind of accelerate or simulate aging. So you do that through UV exposure. So that would be a way to, to just compress in time what would happen over time. But yeah, we realize that this is a very novel lens, and we would need, a number of very carefully controlled experimental and preclinical evidence of this lens working over time. It's not easy because not many animal models can accommodate. So if you want to test this in an animal model, for example, it has to be a primate. So it's it's not easy, but I think the steps that we have done so far is proving a concept that is completely new, which is basically finding a way to reshape a lens using the forces that are available, that are those of the ciliary muscle, and a technique to capture those. The material can be optimized. So we're using off-the-shelf polymer material. It's a HEMA-based material. We're working now with other materials that may be, more tunable, more effective. But every time you choose a new material, this has to be, FDA approved. So it adds time. And as you say, there's not only transparency over time and biocompatibility that are needed to be proved, as they're normal in any new material that comes out for intraocular lenses, but also this fatigue effect to prove how, for how long that lens will work, or if you need to replace, because as your own crystalline lens ages, the material and the lens may age. So that's an excellent question, and yeah, needs to be worked out.
Thank you.
David Lees here. I have another question. The work that you presented near the beginning was, I think, 7 to 10 years old, about bringing very low cost examinations and eyeglasses to the third world.
Yep.
And possibly to this country, because there are certainly a lot of poor people here too. How is that effort going? I mean,
yeah, no, it's going very well. So there is the company is called Optica. It's in Boston, and as I said, the device is manufactured in Madurai in India, and it's been sold around the world. So there is many things being sold in India and in countries of Africa and the Caribbean. Many through NGOs, but also all sorts of practices. And there is another instrument that is actually more, addressing the screening in first world countries. So yeah, the company is doing well. I'm actually going to see them this week in Boston. It's the American Academy of Optometry, and they have a booth, and it's a company that is up and running.
Are there any other questions? Feel free to unmute your microphone and ask away. Well, if there's not any other questions, then we'll thank Susana again. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. I will leave this open for a little bit if anyone wants to stick around and network and chat a little bit. But yeah, I'll give you a sneak preview. We'll have another Tech Talk scheduled. I believe it's in 2 weeks. So November the 16th. So we'll be sending out an email about that, giving you an invitation the next week. So yeah, thanks again, Susana. And yeah, again, I'll leave this open for a bit if people want.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be glad to stay more in chat. Absolutely.